Good day everyone, I am Ina Joy Laureta and for this video discussion, I will discuss about the topics all about managing outsourcing transition followed by my group mates to be discussed about the following and we are the group 4 reporting the chapter 4 of this lesson. So we have topical overview. Number 1, transition management strategies, transition success factors and effectiveness, document readiness, work shadowing, readiness assessment, identifying test candidates for outsourcing, handoffs, scale, and time tracking. So we have also module learning objectives. Number 1, to define transition management. Number 2, define the migration strategies and knowledge transfer frameworks. Number 3, define what are transition risks. Number 4, list the critical success factors. Number 5, identify transition effectiveness. And number 6, outline requirements for good transition documentation. Number 7, explain work shadowing. Number 8, define handoffs. Number 9, the concept of scale. And number 10, explain time tracking. So, the topic for today is managing outsourcing transition. We have 3 types of this: the transition manager, transition strategies, and knowledge transfer framework. Transition management is a set of activities that transpire after a BPO contract is signed that implements or executes the detailed movement or transfer of processes from the client to the work or service provider. A transition manager is responsible for migrating the function or the process from the client location or organization to the service provider or outsourcing organization. The transition manager needs to be an effective communicator as the role requires extensive interaction with the clients. Transition management. The service manager because of the nature of the role. A transition manager needs to have a variety of skills and competencies. Needs to have a strong project management skills as the migration process are complex projects that require expert management skills. Needs to be comfortable in working across cultural environment as most often the client teams are based overseas. Needs to have a thorough understanding of the existing business and legal processes and current as well as emerging technologies as these play a critical role in the offshoring of a business function. Transition strategies. Generally, there are 2 common strategies followed in migrating a function. These are lift and shift, re-engineer, and migrate. Transition strategies, knowledge transfer framework, lift and shift, definition, phases. So, the items to be considered. Advantages, definition. This is the most common methodology used when the process is mature. The lift and shift approach is used for migrating. Phases. Move the current process to the service provider without changes or improvements. Stabilize. Re-engineer the process to achieve efficiency, gain produced, same output, less FTEs. Modify the process, add end user type or strategic automation, combine role with others, move process into production line, negotiate elimination of unnecessary outputs. The next slide to be discussed by Rowena Legaspi.
Lift and shift. Items to consider. Number 1. Process will change not affect process control. Points of output can be done by service provider independently. Onshore approval of process or changes is a good practice. Onshore review if the change impact regulatory control points. So regarding the lift and shift approach for service management programs, there are a few considerations in relations to process changes. So the first point states that if the process changes does not impact process control points, or if the service provider can independently handle the output, then an onshore approval of process changes is a good practice. So this implies that if the changes are within the realm of the service provider's capabilities and do not affect critical control points of the process, they can be approved at the onshore level. So, however, if the process change does not impact regulatory control points, an onshore review it becomes necessary. So regulatory control points refer to aspects of the process that are subject to legal or regulatory requirements or compliance obligations. So in such as cases, an onshore review is important to ensure that the process changes align with the applicable regulatory guidelines and obligations. So in summary, both onshore approval of process changes and onshore review in the case of changes impacting regulatory control points are important considerations when implementing the lift and shift approach. So number 2, major effort post-go live re-engineering. Transition phase can be easy, especially if people and processes are moved. So this take 3 to 4 months only. So onshore has the risk of losing its political will to re-engineer process after a while. So the major effort mentioned in post-go live re-engineering, this refers to the activities and processes that take place after a project or system goes live. The goal of post-go live re-engineering is to refine, optimize, and improve the implemented process, systems, and workflow. So, the transition phase mentioned in the first option implies the period immediately after the system is launched. It suggests that if the people and processes are smoothly transferred during this phase, the transition can be easy and may only take around 3 to 4 months. So the second option states that there is a risk of losing political will to re-engineer process after a while, specifically in the onshore context. So this means that over time, the motivation or support for making further improvements to the processes may decline, especially when the project is managed within the same geographical location as the stakeholders or onshores. Out of the given options, the second option provides an explanation for potential challenges. So, it indicates that there is a risk associated with losing political will to re-engineer processes after some time. Especially in an onshore scenario, this risk suggests that stakeholders may become less motivated to invest resources and effort in making the further improvements or potentially hindering the post-go live re-engineering process. Advantages of an as-is basis process migration. Training the new team is easier, as the process is well understood and documented. Existing employees at the donor location are available to support the process in case of disruptions or instability. A fresh set of eyes, the new team, look at the process from a fresh perspective, often resulting in process improvements and enhanced controls. So the advantage of an as-is basis process migration is that allows for easier training for the new team. Since the process is well understood and documented, the new team can quickly familiarize themselves with how things are currently done. This reduces the learning curve and enables a smoother transitions. So another advantage is that during the migration process, existing employees at the donor locations are available to support the process in case of any disruptions or instability. So their knowledge and expertise can be valuable in resolving issues and ensuring a seamless transfer of the process. So furthermore, having a fresh set of eyes, the new team, look at the process from a fresh perspective can lead to process improvements and enhanced controls. So they may identify inefficiencies or areas for enhancement that were overlooked by the previous team. So this can result in increased efficiency, cost savings, and better outcomes overall. So the advantage of an as-is basis process migrations include easier training, the availability for existing employees for support, and potential for process improvements through a fresh perspective. Re-engineering and migrate. Definitions and items to consider. So definitions. Fundamental rethinking and radically redesigning of the business process to achieve dramatic improvements in critical measures of performance such as cost, service, and speed. Fundamental rethinking and radical redesigning of business processes refer to a strategic approach aimed at transforming how an organization operates from the ground up. Instead of making incremental changes, business process reengineering (BPR) requires a complete re-evaluations and reimagining of existing processes. So the goal of BPR is to achieve dramatic improvements in critical measures of performance, including cost, service, and speed. Cost improvement involves finding more efficient and cost-effective ways to carry out processes, reducing expenses, and optimizing resource allocations. So service improvements and entails enhancing of the quality and levels of service provided to customers, clients, or stakeholders. So speed improvement aims to reduce the time it takes to complete a process, enabling quicker response times and delivering results for more rapidly. So the BPR challenges organizations to question established practices, break down silos, and identify innovative ways to improve overall performance. It focuses on eliminating unnecessary steps, simplifying complex processes, automating manual tasks, leveraging technology, and streamlining workflows. The aim is to create a lean, efficient, and customer-centric organization that can adapt and respond to changing market dynamics. So by fundamentality rethinking and radically redesigning business processes, organization can achieve significant and sustainable improvements in cost effectiveness, service quality, and operational efficiency. However, successful implementation requires strong leadership, effective change management, collaboration across departments, and a clear understanding of the desired outcomes. Items to consider. Useful when the process is either broken and requires fixing, or is due to undergo significant change in the near future, system change or process change. In such cases, it may be important to utilize the expertise of the existing team, which is built over several years, to drive the change before it is handed over the new team. So the item to consider in this scenario is the utilization of existing team and expertise during a process change or fixing a broken process. When a process requires fixing or is about to undergo a significant change, it is essential to leverage the knowledge and experience of the existing team. This team has likely accumulated valuable insights and expertise over several years, which can be instrumental driving the necessary changes successfully. By involving existing team in the change process, their expertise can be utilized to identify the root causes of any broken process and develop effective solutions. So their familiarity with the current systems and processes can provide valuable context and insights that may not be readily available to a new team. So additionally, involving the existing team can help to build buy-in and ownership among the employees as they feel a sense of their responsibility in driving the changes. So furthermore, leveraging the existing team's expertise allows for a smooth transition to new team. So the existing team can share their knowledge, provide training, and document the changes made, ensuring that the new team has a solid foundation to work from. This knowledge transfers reduces the risk of disruption during the transition and helps to ensure the continuity of operations. So, considering the utilization of existing teams' expertise during process change or fixing processes is beneficial because it maximizes the chances of successful change implementations, build employee ownership, and facilitates a smooth transition to new team. Items to consider. Company that outsource industry common processes to a market-leading services provider will generally follow service provider processes. Company changes its processes as part of the transition to service provider. So the two items to consider revolve around the transition of the outsourcing common processes to a service provider. While both items are relevant, it is important to analyze which has a greater impact of the processes of the company. So the first item states that the company that outsources its industry common processes to a market-leading service provider will generally follow the processes of the service provider. So this means that when a company decides to outsource its processes, it typically adopts the processes implemented by the service provider. So this is because the service provider is already market leader and has expertise in carrying out these processes efficiently. By following the service provider's processes, the company can benefit from their expertise and experience, potentially leading to improved efficiency, reduced costs, and increased productivity. So the second item indicates that the company changes its processes as part of the transition to the service provider. So this suggests that during the outsourcing transition, the company undergoes a process of re-evaluating its own processes and making necessary changes to align with the requirements and standards set by the service provider. So this could involve streamlining existing processes, implementing new procedures, or adopting best practices identified by the service provider. So the goal of such changes is to ensure smooth integration with the service provider's operations and maximize the benefits of outsourcing. So between the two items, the second item, the company changing its processes as part of the transition to the service provider, so carries more weight. This is because it implies a deliberate and proactive effort by the company to adapt and optimize its processes, its alignment with the service provider. Rather than passively following predetermined processes, this active participation in the transition process allows the company to tailor the outsourced processes to its specific needs and goals, so leading to a potentially more effective and efficient outsourcing arrangement. So therefore, while the first items highlights the tendency for a company to follow the service provider's processes when outsourcing, the second item emphasizes the proactive role of the company in reshaping its processes during the transition.
Includes the following definitions: inputs, processes, output, communication, supervision. Inputs are documented, source systems and dependencies, timing of delivery, quality assumptions, and workaround in case of failure in delivery of some inputs, historical timeliness and accuracy statistics, half size service provider resource need, identify likelihood of work compression, rushing 3 hours work in 1 hour, or overtime working late to keep to output delivery targets. Format of inputs is structured or not. Processes are documented using the industry standard format and incomplete detail, hands-offs. To other parties, internal and external, documented including timing and format. Interim or flash reports, if required, are documented as deliverables, delivery time, day of month, period targets are documented. Required tools such as macros, workflow, application, shared directory access are listed in sufficient detail to allow replication in the service provider. Formats are completely defined. Control steps and quality assurance checklists are defined. Delivery time or day of period are defined. These are reviewed to ensure they are achievable, consistent with input timeliness. Service provider and transition project managers should validate that timeliness are current and not aspirational tendency to put in desired unrealistic deadlines when outsourcing. Communication channels for output to be explicitly defined. Clarity here minimizes misunderstandings during early production period, especially if the output is uninterrupted to another process. Supervision includes onshore supervision points and what will be reviewed or checklist should be defined. Some country regulations, US required clear trail of supervisory control by an onshore person. Responsibility for output financial statements rests with an accountable onshore official. For shared service centers, particularly clear documentation or supervisory reviewed paves the way for transition into center of excellence mode. Onshore supervision points and what will be reviewed checklists should be defined. For shared service centers, particularly clear documentation on areas of supervisory review paves the way for transition into center of excellence mode where supervisory control rests offshore.
Work shadowing definition is the term used for learning by doing activity service provide personnel generally done at the same location as current company performance. Work shadowing phase. Number 1. Onshore. Personnel doing activity. Onshore personnel performing activity, conduct training service, provide personnel, observe how client does the task. And another one may be done at onshore location with service provider. Staff traveling may be done at service provide location on onshore staff traveling. And service provide staff reviews documentation provided against actual activity done by onshore personnel. Change in documentation are done. Raising of required staffing may be that may be negotiated at this point. Number 2, guide service provider network. Service provider performance the activity. Onshore personnel look over and give close guidance. May be done onshore at service provider site. Complete 1 or 2 full cycles if output is monthly. Guidance is given for 2 months end. If output is daily, guidance is given for few days. Generally 1 to 2 months guide work. Number 3, go live. Service providers performs the activity identifying at service provider site. Performance target in place and required. Change the change in sizing or process to correct the erroneous training provided by onshore not now falls under the change request process and governance. Need closely monitor for a period of 3 months to ensure that stable performance.
I'm here to discuss my topic readiness assessment in managing outsourcing transition module 4, subject of fundamental of business process outsourcing 101. First slide. Readiness assessment purpose. Number 1. Adequately documented. Purely documented current process will result in A. Most current in-house process operate on tribal knowledge. Undocumented steps. B. Services provided adding uncertainty. A process premium in their proposal, not very clear what will be delivered, how, and by when. C. High probability of he said, misunderstanding during initial phase of production. D. Long work shadowing period and high cost as service provider tries to document required process. Number 2 of process readiness assessment. Correctly size generic resources. A. Most currently processed done in-house operate with long experience staff. Veterans enroll. One FTE with 20 years on the same job experience is not equal to one FTE with general experience no matter how bright or expert or diligent. B. Without readiness assessment, the company will estimate the current cost low. The receiving providers may incorrectly size the role, may have to initial use two performers with very structured steps to do the same. One FTE job until knowledge is gained, documented. Number 3 of purpose of readiness assessment. Resource sizing already includes the right level of quality assurance and supervisory control. A. Most in-house processes rely on veterans performer with long developed business acumen that allows unstructured send check for quality assurance. B. Most contracts, especially shared service centers migration, and under-configured because QA supervisors are not included. C. Why is correct under? Why is incorrect under sizing a problem? Because service providers will inevitably use to change request process to add the cost. Adequate documentation. These are the types of adequate documentation. Number 1, input. 2, process. Number 3, output. 4, communication. And the last one is supervision. Adequate documentation input. Consideration of 4 inputs. 1, properly describe input, method of acquisitions, language of input, timing of the input, dependencies. What are the inputs? Is there documentation listing describing the inputs? First bullet. Many onshore processes performed by long-time staff would not have existing documentation. Second bullet. Key to know where there are gaps to understand areas and cause of remediation. How are the inputs received? Less training for processors to start faster growth from new hire to productive performer. Last bullet. Structured input data points to early area for process improvements, efficiency gains from straight to processing. Are inputs in same language as that of provider? First bullet. Can communication onshore be done in same language as that used by provider? Second bullet. Different language adds cost in terms of language, translators, specialists, and panel effect. Letter D. Is there an input data timing condition? Can be received only on business day? Are the inputs received all throughout the month or do they peak on a single day period? First bullet. Peaking inputs may require peak basis. Staffing to keep delivery target. Second bullet. Extra cost of peak personnel. Third bullet. Challenge of work scheduling to use staff during half periods. Is there an input data timing condition? Are inputs received only on defined days? First bullet. Do those days coincide with month ends? Second bullet. Less opportunity to do work scheduling of off-peak staff if work peaks are the same. C. What are the dependencies? What system? External parties. Are dependencies documented? Output from other system process must be received first before PowerPoint input can be delivered. Which, which inputs are delivered by external system, which by internal system. How stable are the system? Do they go down regularly? Are there workarounds in case of input system failures? D. How accurate are the inputs? Quality of input. Are there based historical accuracy statistics can be used to justify cost of measure to improve accuracy. Input errors cost money in terms of reward. Pure quality of input means prior step to validate input must be added. Adequate documentation process checklist. A. Are the process properly documented? B. Are handoffs to other parties, internal and external, shown in the documentation? C. Are interim or flash reports documented? D. Are delivery time, day, of month, period, targets documented? General rule of thumb. If documentation length exceeds the output materially, that is too low a level. Lowel- Lowest level documentation going beyond 2 to 3 page is too much. Are the process properly documented? What documentation is standard? Process map. Who performs what are the hands of to other performer are intuitive. intuitive. Using a specific standard is not important. It is important that a standard is consistently used. How many levels are documented? Must go beyond high-level process. Must document actual output sufficiently to allow a qualified performer with X years experience in process with academic training to replicate output. Must be a simple and straightforward. Are the process properly documented? Are workflow and other technology tools properly referred to in the document? Idea if workflow Ideal if workflow platform is used onshore, but this is infrequent. If specific spreadsheets, access, or other end-user developed programs are used, macros. It is important that the source code and technical documentation for the macro is shared. B. Are hands-off to other parties, internal and external, shown in the documents. Clear documentation of hands-off show areas of process fragmentation. Hands-off are transfer of the task to, to other people before continuing. Aggregate items to review in a single sign of step at the end. May be better required and rich data prior to start of the process. Intelligent input, template, or train performer to do the data enrichment. C. Are interim or flash reports documented? Flash reports allow onshore supervisor to do early process check. Regulatory submissions deadlines are hard, hence critical outputs may need intermediate review. Ideal that the process continues without waiting. Only stop the exception. D. Are delivery time, day of month, period, targets documented? Indicate of required delivery time date important in the process documentation. Quick look at the input received and output delivery allows check of process is and staffing requirements. Tight processing times. Late input. Early month output. Shout shout out opportunities. for required technology process improvement.
How up to date in the documentation? How often in document recertified are the live modified immediately whenever process is changed? Documentation is valuable only if up to date show binders are not useful. Easy to quickly access live status of documentation. Ask performer about this process. Ask him to then point in it the documentation. What are the steps of the delivery of a process or service in contracting of a service provider? Delivery targets following defined delivery objectives define timelines, accuracy, and consistency. Inadequate documents process, you can see here how, with the description documents of how the service will be performed or key operating procedure, control points. In many cases, requirements will include performer qualification and count required tools for clarity of expectations. We can see here the supervision, stating the supervision process, periodic reviews, and how performance will be measured. And the next one is the cost. For a clearly defined cost per input unit or outcome, and clearly defined bonus, penalty, award, and basis. Considerations for output. Number one is the properly described output. Second one is the method of transmission. The third one is language of output. The fourth one is timing of the output. And the last one is the dependencies. Are outputs completely documented? Formats defined in the key management reports down to the colors of certain data. If output is on input to another process, best that structured template is followed. Periodic changes in output and in contents or formats within output are normal, but the change requests should be documented, cost justified, and properly approved. How are the outputs be communicated? First one is transmission channel has to be clearly stated, or small email file upload into MS shared point. Then the next one, as input to another process in workflow or direct entry to another system. Considerations for supervision. The first one is onshore. Second one is the offshore. The third one is staffing, equipment, motivation. And the last one is the country regulations. Where are the onshore supervision points? Some country regulations in US require supervisory control by an onshore persons. Ownership of the output is with the onshore person. In onshore exercises, who has supervisory control? In shared services, next stage of evolution is through centers of excellence where work and supervision is done in another locations. Onshore process is with adequate documentation have greater readiness for offshoring. Documentation on inputs, processes, outputs, communication channels, and supervision allow a service provider third part of shared service center to estimate cost of doing the service offshore with more certainty.
Finite. Finite is every computer has a finite amount of memory. Documented. Documented records something in written, photographic, or other form. The photographer spent years documenting the lives of miners sufficient of scale. Sufficient of scale. Sufficient scale example. The improvement of international relation requires of sufficient of scale. A diplomatic dialogue between the two countries. Identify task candidates or for outsourcing consideration. Readiness assessment, level of documentation of onshore processes, scale, singing saving based on current performer count, time tracking, or task-based FTP assessment. Prioritize roles that are more ready. Lift and shift for documented roles, cost of low, outsourcing readiness. Component of readiness. Component of readiness is motivation, general capacity, and intervention specific capacity.
Handoffs. Definition or transfer of the output to a different performer and approver for further action prior to continuation. Handoff reason for. First, data enrichment. The another performer adds data to transaction. Quality insurance. The second performer is a checker. Control approval for materiality and substance is done by a separate person. How will you get paid? First, Paymaster credits initial employee fair records. Second, timekeeper review overtime records to add overtime pay. Third, payroll clicker review loan records for loan deduction. Fourth, payroll clicker looks and reimbursement record to add payment for expenses advanced by employee. Payroll clicker looks at enriched by pay record and calculate right withholding tax. Pay record supervisor review the whole pay and approves. Paymaster submit net necessary to bank for payment.
Scale. Sufficiency tips of optimize. This is how scale illustrated. We can see here how things or people are going to make it easy, the processes. Number of employees or manning complements, headcount, full-time requirements or FTE. Sufficiency of scale depends on the following. Service provider, which means the provide service. The second one is the requirement of the job. Job requirements as the skill or experience and qualities an employer deems necessary for a candidate to be considered for a role. And the next one is the client. The client is one that is under the protection of another person. Scale in relation to workforce. Sufficiency of scale depends on the service provider for risk management. A 15,000 FTE provider in a single location may prefer engagements of at least 500 FTE. 5% is normal buffer to resources can be ramped up easily or absorbed in other clients when contract ends. Right scale depends on client, percentage of outsourced roles to total staff for risk management and control. A 500 persons finance organization may want to limit initial outsourcing to 10% or 15%. A large company with experience in outsourcing may opt to outsource the entire technology group from data centers to application development to help desk to a provider, especially if care business is non-IT. And this is the tips to optimize scale. If the process to be outsourced is done by only a few FTS full-time equivalent, it is not worth outsourcing. Example, create letter or of credits, but the role is only done by one person who does everything, or one person full day plus a supervisor for a 1 hour a day. Near self-contained roles have good potentials for outsourcing because more FTE covered complete help desk, mortgage processing from application, from acceptance to credit worthiness, point calculation to annotation of loan or deed to the insurance submission to recommendation for funds release. And also the another tips of optimize scale, end-to-end roles are ideal. Start from external contact, ends with external contact, with only one or two intermediate hands off for review approval. External contact can means external to the process, product, P&L, profit and loss. Starts with transaction data, download, and ends with submission to regional or senior management. Intermediate activities, market price verification, calculation of mark to market value, are fully done by service provider. Buyer needs sufficient FTE in outsourced project to justify risk and executive attention, or sourcing management, finance, payments, and legal. And the next is, what is the amount saved if it's too small? The cost of onshore supervision eats up the benefit. Service provider needs sufficient FTE or margin to justify a risk. Supervisor, operations manager, attention, and overhead like finance, billing, legal. Large and small engagement have near same overhead in support except for very large contract training and improvement hardware or enhanced software.
Identifying task candidate for outsourcing. Identifying task candidate for outsourcing. Break down current onshore roles into individual tasks that have scale, high number of FTE hours. Tools for task analysis can be follow the performer. Consultant follow a performer and tracks time spent in each task, called stopwatch method because consultant carry timing devices. Time tracking, each current performer track his activities, how much time is spent in each task over a period of 1 to 2 3 months. Time tracking into granular task bucket is a good way to identify potential roles for outsourcing. Help managers assess whether the work can be simplified. Challenge of simplify now or later. Recording how much time is spent each day in specific task groups. Highlight tasks that occupy a lot of people hours. Some high volume tasks may need thorough analysis to identify specific roles. Tempting tempting to wait and do more granular time tracking and further analysis. Be wary of analysis paralysis. High FTER numbers are directional pointers for outsourcing. Other sub-filters: A. Do not require complex market knowledge. B. Do not have high financial or regulatory risk. C. Tasks which are self-contained have minimal handoffs.